Buenas tardes a todos. Damos las gracias por acompañarnos. Gracias a los representantes de los países miembros que nos acompañan, a los representantes de AmCham Barranquilla, quienes nos acompañan, que están en Washington y nos acompañan en este diálogo. A todos los que también nos siguen por el webcast, les recordamos que de requerirlo, hay traducción simultánea en español e inglés para los que no necesiten. Damos inicio al diálogo que hace parte de la serie de diálogos que organiza la Red Interamericana de Competitividad. Estos diálogos facilitan el intercambio de experiencias de los países y fomentan la cooperación horizontal y traspaso de capacidades. El día de hoy contamos con la participación de representantes de México y de Estados Unidos. Y habiendo dicho eso, quisiera darle yo la palabra y comentar que tendremos en esta primera sesión al señor Pierre Delcibois. Él es gerente de inversiones de fondos que vino desde México para compartirnos hoy la experiencia de México Ventures. Tendremos a Adriana Bonilla, mi colega, quien es especialista de la Oficina de Competitividad de la OEA y coordina la iniciativa de intercambio de experiencia de los países de la RIAC. Adriana será la moderadora de este primer segmento de la agenda. Me gustaría darle la bienvenida a nuestra directora, Maris Roberts, directora del Departamento de Desarrollo Económico, Comercio y Turismo de la OEA.
Muchas gracias, Juan Carlos. Buenas tardes a todos y bienvenidos a este diálogo de la RIAC. Un saludo muy especial para los panelistas y que también tendremos el día de hoy a las misiones permanentes, a los amigos de AmCham de Barranquillas y a todos aquellos que han venido hoy y nos siguen por el webcast. Bienvenidos todos a su casa, que es la casa de la OEA, la Casa de las Américas. Nosotros como OEA y como secretaria técnica de la Red Interamericana de Competitividad, de la RIAC, estamos muy complacidos de contar con su presencia el día de hoy y poder apoyar en el proceso de intercambio de experiencia entre los países de las Américas en el marco de la RIAC. Yo quiero agradecer en particular al gobierno de Panamá por su gran liderazgo al frente de la presidencia de la RIAC y también a México y Estados Unidos por acompañarnos hoy. Cabe destacar también que este evento no sería posible sin la colaboración permanente de los socios de la RIAC y el apoyo financiero de la Agencia Canadiense de Desarrollo Internacional. La intención de esta actividad es que logremos un diálogo fluido, dinámico. Entonces los animo a que participen, pregunten y interactúen en este espacio. Para aquellos que nos siguen por el webcast, también pueden remitirnos consultas por el chat. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Maris. Damos entonces inicio al primer segmento del diálogo. Adriana presentará al señor Delcibois.
Gracias, Juan Carlos. Buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos al diálogo de la RIAC. En particular es un placer contar hoy con la presencia de Pierre. Gracias por venir hoy, gracias por venir desde México. El señor Pierre es gerente de inversiones de la Corporación Mexicana de Inversión de Capital. Él participa en procesos de levantamiento de capital y en el análisis de oportunidades de inversión. Antes de vincularse al fondo de fondos, estuvo vinculado al control financiero en empresas internacionales y trabajó en BBVA en París. Tiene una maestría en aspectos financieros y también en Management en el Business School en Francia. Entonces, Pierre, es un gusto contar contigo ahora aquí en este diálogo y damos paso a tu presentación.
Buenas tardes, Adriana, muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos, gracias por su presencia aquí. Entonces, como dijo Adriana, pues yo soy parte de la empresa Corporación Mexicana de Inversiones de Capital y vengo a presentarle la experiencia del México Ventures. Antes de todo, quería agradecerle a la OEA y a la RIAC hacer posible que compartamos nuestras experiencias y que mejoremos la competitividad de la región. También les quería agradecer a todos los que hicieron posible y que hacen posible la experiencia del México Ventures, como son Nacional Financiera, la Secretaría de Economía y la Corporación Andina de Fomento. Bueno, yo soy un financiero, no sé si aquí en la asistencia hay muchos financieros, entonces a lo mejor antes de todo de empezar con la presentación sería relevante ponerles en contexto, ¿no? No sé si se apagó aquí. ¿Ahí así? Bueno, la experiencia del México Ventures, ¿de qué se trata? México Ventures es un fondo de fondos. ¿Qué es un fondo de fondos? No sé si alguien ahí entiende ese tipo de vocabulario muy específico. Es un fondo de inversión. Entonces, tenemos inversionistas, que son la Secretaría de Economía, Nacional Financiera y la Corporación Andina de Fomento, que invierten a través de nosotros en fondos de inversiones. Por eso nosotros somos un fondo de fondos. También invertimos directamente nosotros en empresas cuando se trata de lo que llamamos coinversiones. Entonces, invertimos en fondos de inversiones. Cuando nos vienen a ver para presentar alguna oportunidad especial, vamos a invertir en una empresa específica. Bueno, eso dicho, espero que ya entiendan un poco de qué se trata. Se trata de inversiones, ¿no? De finanzas, de rendimientos. Invertimos en lo que se llama en español el capital emprendedor. Capital emprendedor sería venture capital en inglés. Y todavía no veo la presentación, pero aquí no sé en qué página. Bueno, el financiamiento, como lo sabemos, es una clave muy importante para el desarrollo. ¿Por qué? Porque muchas de las empresas pymes, que sea en México, en Latinoamérica o en otros países, tienen un acceso a capitales un poco difícil, ¿no? Los bancos no les toman, no les ponen atención y está difícil conseguir capital. Entonces eso se enfoca en la estrategia del capital emprendedor. Una empresa tiene varias etapas de crecimiento. Puede ser una idea, por ejemplo, se me ocurre que está muy útil hacer pagos por celulares, pero ahí nada más tengo una idea. Entonces, a esa idea le tengo que... Hay un sector específico de financiamiento que sería el capital semilla, porque todavía es una semilla, no tiene nada. Luego de esto, se me ocurre que está bien hacer pagos por celulares y ya tengo un prototipo, una aplicación y algunos usuarios. Ahí ya llego al venture capital, donde nosotros nos enfocamos, ¿no? Capital emprendedor. Después de este paso ya viene cuando ya tengo infraestructura para hacer los pagos, tengo bancos como socios, ya estoy en una empresa mucho más institucionalizada, voy al capital privado, el private equity, y de allá en adelante, ¿no? Todo eso para decir que el ciclo de financiamiento de las empresas está largo, está amplio, pero tiene segmentos y que hay que responder a cada segmento con herramientas distintas. Bueno, entonces nosotros, México Ventures, capital emprendedor, invertimos en fondos de inversiones que se enfocan a empresas tempranas, pero no semilla, sino de la etapa siguiente, que en otros casos no tendrían acceso a capitales. ¿Por qué? Porque pues, por los mismos problemas de las pymes y de los bancos. Eso dicho, ya yo creo que voy a poder presentar un poco más la estrategia que siguió el gobierno mexicano para desarrollar esa experiencia. Está importante, muy importante, entender que el México Ventures no es una experiencia aislada, porque por el mismo ciclo de financiamiento de empresas, si yo le doy una respuesta a un problema para las empresas tempranas, pero luego cuando crezcan no encuentran financiamiento, pues ahí se queda mi iniciativa y no tiene sentido ni tiene impacto. Entonces lo que hizo el gobierno mexicano en 2006 fue crear lo que se llama de forma genérica el Fondo de Fondos, que es la Corporación Mexicana de Inversiones de Capital. Lo crearon los cuatro bancos de desarrollo, Nacional Financiera, Bancomex, Banobras y Fosir. Y esa empresa es la que administra todas las inversiones de la banca de desarrollo en la industria del venture capital o del private equity. Al crear esa empresa se institucionalizó la administración, se incorporaron mejores prácticas, se desarrolló un gobierno corporativo muy fuerte y esos aspectos son claves para hacer más eficiente la iniciativa y para enfrentar algunos desafíos, ¿no? Entonces, el primer punto es entender que la iniciativa tiene que ser global y tiene que cubrir todo el ciclo de financiamiento de las empresas. En 2010 se creó el Fondo de Fondos México Ventures, que se enfoca específicamente a esa etapa. Y en 2012 se creó el Fondo Startup México, quien se enfoca a la etapa semilla. También como parte de la iniciativa global se tiene que fomentar un marco legal adecuado para el desarrollo de la industria, se tiene que fomentar la cultura del capital privado y del capital emprendedor a través de eventos, de foros, de talleres, a través de cursos en las universidades, para que haya un ecosistema eficiente entre los empresarios que buscan capital y los fondos de inversiones que buscan inversiones. Entonces, la globalidad de la iniciativa es muy importante. Aquí está el ciclo de financiamiento del cual estaba hablando. Y también una hipótesis es que buscando los rendimientos se va a crear desarrollo. Es decir, nosotros como Corporación Mexicana de Inversiones de Capital, nuestro objetivo concreto, primero, no es el fomento, son los rendimientos. Pero al buscar inversiones que generen rendimientos, esas empresas van a ser sustentables y los esfuerzos de la banca de desarrollo van a ser a largo plazo, porque las empresas no van a quebrar, porque las empresas van a mejorar, porque las empresas van a crear gobierno corporativo, van a crear innovación, van a crear buenos empleos y, en fin, van a mejorar la competitividad. El ecosistema, que es muy importante para que esos esfuerzos que a veces son dispersos, en algunos casos son dispersos. Por ejemplo, antes de crear el fondo de fondos, la empresa, en 2006, cada banco de desarrollo estaba invirtiendo de su lado. Al crear un vehículo único, se está haciendo más eficiente las inversiones porque la administración es más profesional, porque hay más diálogo entre nosotros y la industria, y es muy importante ese diálogo. Bueno, de los desafíos que el México Ventures encontró, No sé si me queda mucho tiempo. Sí. Ok. Bueno, no sé si hasta acá está bien o si les faltó alguna información. Pero bueno, vamos a hacer las preguntas al final. Entonces, de los desafíos del México Ventures, pues lo primero que uno encuentra es, bueno, tenemos dinero para invertir, pero el mercado está chico. ¿A dónde vamos a invertir? Entonces, se tiene que desarrollar otra vez todo este ecosistema para tener oportunidades de inversión, para tener empresas que estén listas para recibir inversiones de capital, que no es deuda, es otro tipo de inversiones, porque al invertir capital yo voy a participar en el management. Y bueno, educar a los empresarios es importante. Y también una forma a través de la cual pudimos resolver ese problema del tamaño fue invirtiendo no solo en México, sino también en Estados Unidos, a través de fondos americanos, y ellos a su vez tratar de hacer que ellos inviertan en México. De esa forma traemos a tecnologías, traemos a saber hacer, traemos a know-how, y es muy importante para apalancar el desarrollo de la industria. Bueno, también un desafío que uno encuentra al hacer ese tipo de iniciativas es cómo vamos a manejar que sea dinero del gobierno, pero una administración privada, y sobre todo los conflictos de intereses. Pues al tener el gobierno como inversionista, no se pueden meter a, digamos, influenciar a las decisiones de inversión. Y entonces, de esta forma, la administración es mucho más independiente, también con un gobierno corporativo muy fuerte, con consejeros independientes muy presentes y con poder de decisión bastante importante en la organización. Se puede limitar y mitigar ese tipo de riesgos, ¿no? Y hacer que al final le conviene tanto al gobierno como a la industria que se realicen inversiones de forma muy rigurosa. Digamos que de los resultados del México Ventures y de toda la estrategia que el gobierno mexicano llevó a cabo desde el 2006, lo primero que yo quisiera destacar es lo que llamamos nosotros el efecto multiplicador. ¿Qué es eso? Eso se trata de que el gobierno mexicano, por cada dólar que le invirtió a esa industria, a nuestra empresa, hubo 54 dólares más que llegaron por parte de inversionistas extranjeros o por parte de inversionistas nacionales, pero que ese tipo de iniciativa fomenta y favorece las inversiones extranjeras en el país. Entonces, al final, es mucho más eficiente que ir solo y que fomentar así directamente empresas, sino que a través de fondos atraemos a muchos inversionistas y atraemos a muchas inversiones. Eso es muy importante, y al final, aunque generar empleo no es el objetivo concreto, como les comentaba, que el objetivo concreto es rendimiento ajustado a riesgo, creemos empleos sustentables, creemos dinamismo económico, creamos desde, bueno, ahorita en las empresas que tenemos como dentro del portafolio, unos 50,000 empleos directos en México, y más de 120,000 a nivel de América Latina. También el rendimiento que ofrecemos al gobierno a través de nuestra administración, de nuestra selectividad y de las inversiones es es atractivo y podemos reciclar las distribuciones para seguir creciendo y seguir fomentando esa experiencia. Para nada más subrayar algunas conclusiones muy rápido, Adriana, antes de que abramos el diálogo, pues otra vez decir que es muy importante que el esfuerzo sea global, que sea a través de todo, a lo largo del ciclo de financiamiento, que sea también en el ámbito legal, creando, por ejemplo, se creó en México una estructura de empresa que se llama la SAPI, Sociedad Anónima Promotora de Inversión, en la cual se reconoce derechos de minoría, en la cual se reconoce mecanismos de salida para favorecer la inversión. También se creó un curso entre FOSIR y el IPADE para educar a futuros administradores de fondos, para educar a empresarios. Se está llevando a cabo muchos foros, muchos talleres. O sea, al final es una estrategia muy global y que tiene que ser global, si no, no va a ser eficiente. También otro punto que quería ahí subrayar es, rendimiento ajustado a riesgo. Lo siento, sí suena como muy financiero, pero al final eso va a traer crecimiento económico sustentable, empleos sustentables. Porque una empresa perdedora no es sustentable. Y bueno, pues no cerrar la puerta a invertir fuera de su país, porque al final ese dinero va a regresar. Y ya vimos que por cada dólar, 54 dólares llegan. Es un efecto multiplicador de 54, es bastante alto, atrae mucha inversión adentro de México y eso le beneficia a todos, ¿no? Yo creo que con eso, obviamente, pues no vine nada más a hablar yo, ya les hablé mucho, ya les aburrí mucho, entonces, pues por favor, adelante, cualquier pregunta.
Quisiera hacer un énfasis antes de dar inicio a las preguntas. Lo primero, bueno, agradecer por esta valiosa presentación. Mencionar que esta es una de las más de 50 experiencias que están recogidas en el informe Señales de Competitividad de las Américas, que pueden encontrar en riacreport.org. México nos aportó esta experiencia junto con otras 4. Y mencionó también dentro de su contribución de información la oportunidad de colaborar con otros países. Y lo hablábamos con Pierre antes de la sesión, que desde México Ventures abren las puertas para otros países, para hacer giras técnicas. No sé si quieres un poco comentarlo.
Adriana, sí, gracias, Elena. Sí, la verdad es que nosotros cuando hicimos esa experiencia, pues obviamente antes de hacerlo dimos un diagnóstico para ver qué se hacía en otros países y pues cualquier cosa que les pueda ofrecer para que se replique ese tipo de estrategia, de experiencia en otros países. Nosotros estamos dispuestos a recibir invitados, a hacer talleres, a fomentar, no sé, un grupo de trabajo. Entonces cualquier persona, cualquier país que esté interesado, que se ponga en contacto con la RIAC para que haga posible ese tipo de reuniones en donde yo creo que todos podemos aprender mucho.
De hecho, se evidencia en la experiencia que ustedes también aprendieron de casos de Brasil, de Austria, de Israel. Entonces creo que también es interesante cómo ustedes consolidaron una iniciativa y ahora pueden también traspasar estas capacidades.
Así es, exacto.
Bueno, Pierre, si te parece bien, vamos a abrir el espacio al público para consultas. Sé que quizás muchos tienen algo que preguntar y ahondar y compartir sobre sus países. El micrófono está ahí en la parte central. Los animo a todos aquellos que quieran preguntar o consultarle a Pierre, aprovechando su presencia el día de hoy. También aquellos que nos siguen por webcast, está abierto el chat para que por favor nos emitan sus preguntas. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta. Si por ahora no hay ninguna pregunta, yo entonces tengo la oportunidad y pregunto algo más. La señora, por favor, en el micrófono. Sí, por favor.
Buenas. Yo le escucho.
¿Aló? La pregunta era, las empresas con las que los fondos trabajan, de los capitales semilla y los capitales emprendedores, ¿en qué orden, digamos, están determinadas las inversiones o el tamaño de empresa para que ustedes, o sea, esté dentro del rango que ustedes quieren trabajar en esas empresas? Y la segunda, más o menos, entiendo, son 6, 7 años que llevan ustedes con el fondo desde el 2006. ¿Qué rentabilidad los gobiernos le han transmitido ustedes en promedio a lo largo de estos años?
Muchas gracias por las preguntas. Pues en cuanto a la primera pregunta, los fondos, hablando del México Ventures específicamente, los fondos, digamos, bueno, México Ventures invierte en fondos de inversiones y ellos a su vez van a invertir en empresas. El rango de inversiones de ellos obviamente depende de cada fondo. Cada fondo tiene su política, su tesis de inversión, pero diría que las inversiones se ubican entre unos $200,000 hasta pueden llegar a $5 millones en empresas que muchas veces piden esos fondos que ya tengan ventas, que a veces piden que ya tengan flujo de efectivo positivo. En términos de tamaño de empresa depende, la verdad, yo creo que es un rango bastante amplio, pero depende de cada fondo. En cuanto a la segunda pregunta, bueno, la empresa se creó en 2006 y en 2006 con 14 fondos que nos legaron, bueno, participaciones, perdón, en 14 fondos que nos legaron nuestros accionistas. En estos fondos nosotros, para poder hablar de rentabilidad, hay que hacer, digamos, o sea, hay que agrupar por cosecha, por año, porque una inversión que yo hago en un fondo en 2000, que ahorita ya está cerrado el fondo, ya puedo ver el rendimiento, porque son inversiones a 10 años. En ese tipo de fondos, que nosotros tenemos una rentabilidad del 8.5% en dólares, lo que es en línea con lo que dio la industria global del capital privado. ¿Y por qué? Porque por lo mismo de que pues, hubo una crisis por ahí en el 2009, y entonces muchas de esas inversiones a nivel mundial también no han dado tanto. Y también nosotros pues hay que entender que tuvimos que pagar una curva de aprendizaje al invertir en pocos fondos disponibles, al invertir en un mercado poco maduro, el que era México en esos tiempos, pero nos comparamos muy bien con actores como CalPERS, que en estas mismas cosechas dieron un rendimiento del 8.7. Nos comparamos muy positivamente con los mercados públicos, tanto el Dow Jones como el índice S&P, que dieron unos rendimientos del 2 o del 2.5. Ahora en las inversiones que hicimos desde 2006, vamos con un rendimiento muy de acuerdo con lo que se llama la curva J, que es de que, perdón, ya es muy técnico, pero nada más es decir que inversiones en capital privado no se pueden medir al año segundo o al tercer año. Se tienen que medir cuando se acaben, y para entender si van bien o van mal, se van viendo conforme una curva de rendimiento, que es así, curva J. ¿Por qué? Porque en un principio yo le doy dinero al fondo y el fondo se lo gasta a gastos de constitución, management fee. Entonces yo le doy 100 y tiene 0. Pero luego le doy 1.000.000 para que invierta y ya tiene 1.000.000. Y entonces va creando valor y el rendimiento va subiendo. Esperamos que en el fondo en las inversiones que realizamos desde 2006 vamos a llegar a un rendimiento del 15 o del 20% en dólares y vamos pues en ese camino, ¿no?
Muchas gracias, Pierre, por esa respuesta. No sé si alguien más del público, la audiencia, tenga alguna consulta que quiera realizar. Está el micrófono abierto para cualquiera de ustedes que quiera preguntar algo. Bueno, en caso de que no haya ninguna otra pregunta, Pierre, no sé si quieres cerrar con algún mensaje para tus contrapartes en los países.
Sí, con mucho gusto, Adriana. Pues primero, muchas gracias por haber sido aquí y por haberme escuchado este discurso un poco aburrido y muy financiero. Espero que les haya sido útil y cualquier cosa que se les pueda ofrecer para desarrollar ese tipo de experiencia y para, pues, en fin, mejorar la competitividad de Latinoamérica. Nosotros estamos a sus órdenes ahí en la Corporación Mexicana de Inversiones de Capital y pues eso sería todo, ¿no?
Pierre, parece que tenemos muy activo nuestro webcast, nos están siguiendo los ministerios de Ciencia y Tecnología, autoridades de competitividad, universidades que hacen parte del consorcio de universidades de la OEA, y tenemos una serie de preguntas, pero aquí hay una que se ha enfatizado y es ¿qué clase de empresas califican? ¿Qué garantías respalda cada etapa? ¿A qué tasa de interés por cada etapa? Y lo pregunta Hugo Figueroa de Guatemala.
Bueno, buenas tardes, Hugo. Pues primero, pues es justamente esa pregunta está muy interesante porque nos da un vistazo del trabajo que tenemos que hacer para que la gente entienda lo que es el capital privado, porque nosotros no damos préstamos, no hay tasa de intereses, no pedimos garantías. Lo que es el capital privado son inversiones de capital. Entonces, lo que va a hacer una empresa que, por ejemplo, necesita de recursos para crecer o para capital de trabajo o lo que sea, va a haber un fondo de inversión y el fondo va a analizar si le parece interesante la oportunidad, le va a comprar una parte de su empresa, es decir, le va a comprar acciones, va a decir, bueno, te compro el 60% por tanto y de ahora en adelante vamos a trabajar juntos. Yo voy a como inversionista, pero también como socio, voy a estar adentro del management, voy a tener yo mi influencia, voy a tener algo que decir. Si no me gusta el management, vamos a tener que trabajar juntos. Y eso es muy diferente a un préstamo. Un préstamo, te pido garantía, te pido escrituras, te digo una tasa de interés y tú lo vas pagando. Ahí no. En capital privado no es así. En capital privado compro una parte de tu empresa y trabajamos juntos por 4, 5, 6 años. Y después, yo como fondo de inversión tengo que vender para regresar el dinero a mis inversionistas. Entonces es digamos, aunque suena un poco raro, es una boda. Se va a llevar, pues vamos a ir de pareja, vamos a tener que vivir juntos por 5 o 6 años y ya me vas a tener que dejar ir. Entonces es muy importante entender eso. No damos crédito, porque es otro punto de vista y créanme, yo trabajé del lado de crédito en el BBVA, como lo mencionaba Adriana, y un banco eran créditos estructurados y pide muchas garantías, analiza los riesgos y determina una tasa de interés. Del lado del capital, se analiza los riesgos, pero es otro punto de vista, se analiza la oportunidad, se analiza si el mercado hay oportunidad de crecimiento, si hay oportunidad de rendimiento, porque al final, si le va muy bien a la empresa, a mí me va a ir muy bien, y si le va mal, a mí también. Entonces, Pues Hugo, lo siento, no te puedo contestar de una tasa de interés o de garantías, sino decirte que pues el capital privado es otro tipo de financiamiento, es otro tipo de relación, es de verdad estar socios y de verdad crecer juntos. Y como dicen muchos de los empresarios que pasaron por un fondo de inversión, más vale tener 20% de algo que vale 100 millones de dólares que tener el 100% de algo que vale 200 dólares. Entonces, pues sí, hay que estar abierto a abrir las puertas de su empresa, hay que estar abierto a abrir el management. Son esfuerzos a veces muy fuertes, pero por eso también, les repito, la estrategia para fomentar el capital privado tiene que ser global y tiene que incluir muchos foros, muchos talleres, para que los empresarios entiendan lo que es el capital privado.
Muchas gracias, Pierre. Creo que Pierre se merece un aplauso.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias por esta excelente presentación y con ninguna duda, en la RIAC vamos a seguir apoyando esta iniciativa y cualquier intercambio con los países.
Sí, con todo gusto. Gracias a ustedes y una buena tarde.
Te damos gracias, Pierre, y sé que tienes que tomar tu vuelo de regreso a México, así que te deseamos el mejor retorno. Cualquier consulta que tengan, cualquier duda que no les haya quedado completamente claro, pues nos ponemos en contacto con el señor Desigó. Igual nos pueden contactar a través de riacnet.org. Así que de nuevo un aplauso para el señor Desigó, por favor. Un buen viaje. Antes de retomar el segundo diálogo, tomaremos un receso de 10 minutos. Los invito a tomar un café y hay algunos alimentos también a disposición. Good afternoon. We're going to start the second part of the dialogues. I'd like to welcome back everybody who's following us via webcast. You're welcome to send your questions after the dialogues start. The second part of the dialogue, we have the pleasure of receiving representatives from the United States. Our panel will be composed by Ms. Tiffany Karp. She's a Chief Operating Officer from the Global Center for Medical Innovation. Welcome, Ms. Karp. We are happy to have you here today. Ms. Lynn Costa will also be part of the panel. She's a Trade Developer Advisor of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we'll have Mr. Cesar Pargas. He's Chief of the Office of Competitiveness of the OAS, who will carry out the moderation until the end of the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, and we'll take our turns, and we'll have Tiffany Karp first with us, and thank you all who are joining us today. We know it's Friday afternoon, it's the end of the week, so we really appreciate the effort of all of you here and all of you through the webcast. Thank you very much for continuing joining the presentations. And as we had in the first session, the objective is to share some of the best practices that countries in the Americas have undertaken over the last few years, and to find a way to enhance cooperation, collaboration, not only between governments, but also private sector and entities, stakeholders that are part of these efforts. In the first part of this panel, we'll have the opportunity to learn more about the Global Center for Medical Innovation. Tiffany will share with us not only her experience in this center, but overall what have been the objectives of the project, and to share her experience in the field. She has been in this field of innovative medical technology over 11 years. She is now the general manager and COO of the center. But she has an extensive experience working in this field in the private sector. And she has an international business degree from Loyola University and an MBA from Georgetown University here in Washington. So Tiffany, I would thank you again for joining us today. We'll open the program with your presentation. We'll do about 15 minutes or so. Then we'll have some questions, and then we'll ask Lynn to please join us in the panel as well. So Tiffany, please go ahead.
Thanks
Thank you very much
for having me today. I'll just spend a little time giving you an overview of GCMI and some of the projects that we're doing right now, and some of our lessons learned, and then take your questions. So there we go. So we're a nonprofit startup. We were founded by Georgia Tech, St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute, which is a preclinical GLP facility in Atlanta. They do animal testing and training there, about a couple miles from our facility. Piedmont Healthcare, which is a big hospital system in Atlanta, and the Georgia Research Alliance. There's this issue in the Southeast region where there's a lot of innovation, but the med tech industry should be bigger. And when you look at why that gap was there, someone would come up with an idea at Georgia Tech or a clinician at Piedmont, and they didn't know where to go. So they would end up leaving and going to California, Minneapolis, or Boston. And because there are large connected ecosystems there and lots of investors, they would leave and not come back. So the leadership of these organizations got together and said, you know, if we had a center that we could send people to develop these technologies, we could keep those innovations and grow startups and companies in the Southeast region. So that's how it all kind of came together. We're the only one in the Southeast region. There are lots of independent design firms, engineering firms, a lot of pieces of the puzzle spread around, but no one entity to bring them together, and that's what we're doing through GCMI. Our primary funding came from the Department of Commerce. We were one of the first winners of the I-6 Challenge Grant, which is a relatively new grant in the United States focused on entrepreneurship and new ways to commercialize technologies. So that, together with a grant from the Economic Development Agency and another one from the Georgia Research Alliance, enabled us to build a 12,000 square foot medical device commercialization center in Midtown Atlanta, right next to Georgia Tech. We opened almost exactly a year ago. So we're really focused, two things. One, we want to create more startups. We want to see these technologies kind of get into our region and create jobs and grow companies. And then, like everybody in the medical device space, we're all driven by improving patient care and patient lives. So I talked to you a little bit about the market need and those critical gaps. Another issue that we faced in the Southeast is a lack of investment capital. And when you're talking about innovation in medical device technologies, that early stage capital, that first $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 is really critical. We see a lot of general technology investing in the Southeast, and so we're starting to see, with bringing this ecosystem together, more interest from the private equity and venture community in how do we take advantage of investing in the universities and the technologies coming out of this. And then the limited commercialization expertise, again, I mentioned the disparate groups all over the place trying to help entrepreneurs with their commercialization activities. And so now we're able to really bring them together. So medical technology is a core strength of the Southeast region. We have Georgia Tech, we have UAB, there's Vanderbilt, there's Clemson, University of Florida. All of these programs have really strong engineering focus, state-of-the-art, world-renowned medical centers. And so we really wanted to put together a program, a way to get those innovations and prioritize them based on their commercial potential and get them out into the marketplace. So we're acting as a facilitator and to trying to collaborate with all these different organizations and putting a formal process around, identifying unmet clinical needs and then bringing them through our center, surrounding them with the ecosystem and our partners to get them into the market. So this slide kind of shows you the puzzle. Medical devices, it's a very multidisciplinary industry. It's interesting when you get an engineer and a physician and an investor in the room, and you've essentially got three tremendous egos, and everybody thinks they're right. And so it's a delicate art of coordinating and orchestrating the process and the translation of that idea in that engineer's lab through the doctor's clinic and out into the market. And so we're at the center, being the conductor on that, and it's fun. So medical device development is a really complex process, and it's hard to coordinate those things, as I mentioned, and where we're really trying to focus within our facility. I talk about within our facility, we've got the design, engineering, prototyping, small-scale manufacturing. We've got the clean room space, but that's just a part of it. But that enables us to go faster through that middle cycle of the iteration. And we've seen that recently in the past few months, which has been, it's fascinating. So our partner, SJTRI, is a couple miles away, and there's a startup in Atlanta that is working with a biomaterial and developing a new kind of pediatric heart valve. And they were struggling in the animal work to hold the valve in place while you were doing the suturing. And so they needed to come up with some mechanism to hold the device. And we were struggling with solving the problem. And within 3 hours, they came in, we had it sketched out on paper, designed in SolidWorks, in the rapid prototyping machine to a sheep surgery the next day. We were able to get real-time feedback from the surgeon, take it back to GCMI, modify it, rapid prototype it again for an ex vivo study the following week. And things just don't happen that way. So that was one of the visions that we had, and to see it really kind of come together was really exciting. So we surround ourselves with partners, and we've got a very broad network, but we've worked hard to build relationships with people in this network. So it's not just a Rolodex. I'm really working to build personal relationships with the best and brightest people in this industry, and so we can bring them in on different projects. As we can't be all things to all people, but we can build those relationships and quickly put teams together to solve innovation problems in medical technology. And I think this is a big area for potential collaboration. As part of this, we recently signed an MOU with a consortium in Ireland, where Atlanta, the Southeast region, will serve as a commercialization springboard for companies Irish companies and European companies wanting to get into the U.S. market, and vice versa. It's a consortium of universities in Ireland called Metric Ireland, and they've got a lot of different resources at their universities, and so we're talking now of how do we just pick a project and test it out. And so, when you talk about how do we collaborate across the Americas, I think there are lots of opportunities with this model. So just to talk a little bit about our capabilities, I mentioned what we've got in our facility. We've got a design lab that's a space where we have a lot of brainstorming sessions with innovators, with whiteboards and Sharpie markers, and there's paper everywhere. And once we determine what we're going to design, what the design is, we can move into the SolidWorks and create 3D files that we then can send into the next room where we've got the rapid prototyping capabilities, 3D printing and that sort of thing. And then the big mills and machine tools, depending on what the device is and what the material is. We also have clean room space, which is really important because when you're a startup, and a lot of times you'll have your team, your technology, you know what you got to do, where you're going, but no investor is going to give you money to build your own clean room before you test it in the market. And so they want to see commercial validation and the clinical validation before they'll give you money to grow. On the flip side of that, a lot of contract manufacturers don't really want to work with startups because it's very small volume. Startups don't have a lot of money. And so it becomes this chicken and egg issue, if you will, where you can't raise money until you've proven your technology, and you can't prove your technology until you've raised money. So we've got a company incubating in our space right now. They make craniofacial implants. They're starting to commercialize in Europe and going through the FDA process right now. And so it's really exciting to be able to provide that infrastructure that otherwise they would not really be able to move that quickly. These are some pictures of our development lab. These were taken right a year ago, right when our grand opening happened, so they're all new and shiny. We've done a really good job recently of making it messier. So maybe next time we'll have some action shots and that sort of thing. But it really has been tremendous to have all of this state-of-the-art equipment in one place. Education is a big part of what we do as well. Doctors and engineers know how to come up with ideas for things, but they don't necessarily know how to commercialize. They don't understand the regulatory process. They don't really understand how to raise money. And so we work with partners, so university partners, economic development partners to host certain education series. We'll soon start a webinar and podcast to help people just understand not necessarily a formal certificate or a university type education, but just a framework of thinking when you're in the lab. And then I wanted to show you a few pictures of some of the things that we've been working on. You know, the art and science of design. I come from the business side of medical devices. We've got a tremendous new design build guy who joined our team full-time in January. And it's a fascinating process to watch. You know, you'll see the sketching that happens, and then you know, the rapid prototyping and the iteration of, oh, this doesn't fit together the right way, we need to do it again. This is a technology that's coming, that they're working on at Georgia Tech, that's going to help children with disabilities learn using a smart tablet. There we go. We work with a range of materials. We're doing everything from a new type of walker, elderly assist device. We did some work with some pediatric bone screws for cranial surgery, really micro machining type work. We're seeing a lot of activity in health IT and mobile apps, and we don't have that capability within GCMI, but a lot of times people will come to us with that expertise. They just don't know how to design the box around it. So we'll design the enclosures and the holders and that sort of thing. And then I think our biggest lesson learned, and I'll wrap it up here, but our biggest lesson learned has been is the people. Not the machines. And so, you know, for a few months after the construction was finished and the machines were delivered, it was beautiful. We have a beautiful, beautiful facility, but we didn't have anyone to really run them. And, you know, I think it's a real challenge in our country as we bring people, bring manufacturing back to the United States, back from Asia. People don't know really how to machine parts anymore. The machinists have kind of gone away. So it's a real challenge to find those people, to have them trained on the machine, and to make it go. And I think at the end of the day, you know, that's where the key focus is. And, you know, really like any organization, it really comes down to the talent and expertise there.
Excellent. Thank you,
So,
Tiffany.
thanks.
I think the experience shows how bringing together different public and private actors, you can build a research system that's going to lead to products and services in the market. And I think if we review some of the cases that were presented in the report, in addition to the Medical Innovation Center of Atlanta, there's a lot of interest among countries in the Americas to talk about innovation, to talk about clusters. And you finish your presentation with an emphasis on people. And I've listened to several presentations about innovation where they emphasize that we need ideas, we need entrepreneurs, we need mentors and mentorship, and we need capital. And in terms of mentorship and services and bringing together all these actors, what has been your experience in the center to provide this mentorship and bring those companies that may have some element of the value chain in place, but that need the other actors to collaborate? How to break that barrier of creating the confidence, the incentives, and the rules to participate in such an environment?
Yeah, so you know, I talked about our partner network, and essentially, I meet with people constantly. We review their background, you know, how we can plug them into different projects. You know, I was at a conference in Washington all week, and you know, someone would come to me and say, "Hey, I'm a physician. I have an idea about something. It's in this space. What do you think?" And I was able to bring one of our physician innovators to, you know, connect them in kind of a mentoring type role. It's just an ongoing process of the relationship building, right? And so someone comes up with they have a problem, and I go into the database, or immediately I know who they should talk to, and we bring them into the center, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and they're connected.
And when you build this ecosystem with public universities, private universities, private companies, how do you set up the connections in terms of the people, but also on the legal instruments and regulatory environment what are the conditions that are necessary to make an ecosystem like this work?
Universities, universities are tough. You know, coming into, this is my first experience in a nonprofit. It's my first experience working in an academic environment. So it's certainly been a challenge, you know, navigating within all the different silos, if you will, within the university system. You know, from a framework thing, you know, it's important to keep intellectual property is probably the biggest. So it's important to really work those details out. We have kind of an IP firewall at GCMI. It's really important for us to, you know, whatever gets invented at GCMI gets assigned back to the inventor. There's not a lot of times when you go into a university, they'll want to take a piece of that if an invention happens there. And that just really hurts startups. You know, prevents them, it makes it more difficult for them to raise funding. So, you know, definitely an IP agreement. The non-disclosure agreements. And then we've been structuring everything more like long-term consulting agreements. So, you know, okay, for this partnership fee, these are the things that you get. This is the framework by which we'll work, whether it's quarterly meetings or regular working sessions, and then just document it and execute.
Excellent. And I think the other area where, before I open the floor to some other questions, there's a lot of interest in supporting small and medium-sized enterprises and even micro-enterprises around the Americas. And you mentioned that in order to get the center running, you were part of a grant from the Department of Commerce. And then I think in your presentation, when you presented the profile to the report, there's an indication of special programs for small businesses. So how do you encourage and work with small businesses to become part of this innovation environment?
So we, you know, are getting more and more involved in the startup community in general in Atlanta. You know, I work really closely with the Southeastern Medical Device Association in Atlanta, with the Metro Atlanta Chamber, you know, and through those key relationships, really getting the word out about how we can help them. You know, the education sessions were attended by some local medtech entrepreneurs. And as we are growing, as the word starts to spread about some of the work that we're doing, I'm starting to get just more calls where, you know, can we meet and talk about growing my business, or can I meet and tour your facility, and can I pick your brain on this idea? Or so it's just being accessible.
Why did you end up being an NGO as opposed to any other form of organization?
The nonprofit aspect?
Yes. Why is it important to have this actor as the center to bring together all the rest of the ecosystem?
Yeah, so, you know, I wasn't involved with GCMI in the grant coming together, but, you know, the founders were all nonprofits, you know, with Georgia Tech and St. Joseph's Translational Research Institute, and then there was the public-private partnership of Georgia Research Alliance. You know, and we really are looking at this as a resource for the community. And, you know, not being distracted, I think, by investors and you know, just the challenges of being accountable to in a for-profit organization. You know, we are building a self-sustaining model, so we can keep the lights on and continue to run the machines and help entrepreneurs and help startups.
Thank you, Tiffany. I don't know if anyone has a question that can come to the microphone before I continue to monopolize Tiffany's time and opportunity. I don't know if we have any question. No? Pues.
I have a question for you regarding the sustainability. You were saying that you would looking towards to be self-sustainable in the future.
Yes.
And I know you have with this grant, you have established the infrastructure needed to provide a service to the MSMEs or the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So my question to you would be, more or less, if you can give us a hint of how is that sustainable model, business model that you are proposing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. We are fee for service. So, which works quite well actually, because people come in, people will take advantage of free stuff, and there's no value in that, right? And it's really important for me to see when people come in and need help that they've done some real strong homework beforehand. So they've stayed up late at night writing business plans, researching, understanding the process, presenting to investors. They have that passion to move forward. So our fees are competitive with the rest of the market. It's very transparent. We've got a very transparent, collaborative, iterative process. So a lot of design engineering firms, too, will sometimes take equity, lower fees, and take a piece of the company instead. And we just wanted to keep it very simple and clean, and it's working really well.
And you mentioned that you serve also as an incubator, an accelerator.
Yeah.
What are the criteria to graduate companies from that system?
Well, so
how does it work?
It's incubator light, I would say. It wasn't the original design to be an incubator, but as we were beginning to launch, there was so many requests. Can I have space here? Can I just be here? They want to all be together so they can learn from each other and understand, well, how did you deal with the FDA, and how did you deal with that quality system problem, and just understanding the investment process. So we provide facility access for them. There is no criteria. There's no financial support or anything like that. No, we don't supplement anything. We've got 3 different companies in there right now in various stages of development. So it's just fee for service, and my hope is that they can use the facility as a platform for getting out quickly so new people can come in. Because if they leave quickly, then we've done a good job.
When you were designing the center and the specific roles you were going to play in this medical device in a particular region of the United States, did you take into account any other model, maybe in a different sector or a different region, that facilitated your conception on what should be included and what should not be included?
Yeah, the focus was really medical devices. Georgia Tech, there's tremendous medical technology coming out of Georgia Tech, and there was just a real avenue needed to commercialize it. And then when you look broader out through the region and all of the tremendous work coming out of Clemson and UAB and Vanderbilt and University of Florida, medical devices just made sense. And then in terms of models, the nonprofit model was the right one to raise the money that we needed to raise, to provide the platform for education and bringing all these different groups together and keeping the focus on that versus building a big design firm.
Please, Leanne.
Is this on?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Leanne
Hi.
from the Commerce Department. Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you for being here. I have a question just from the government side. This sounds like such a wonderful project, and I'm so glad that it's been able to be shared with the Americas through this forum. How did you first end up getting in touch with EDA and the Commerce Department, and how did that relationship form? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I wasn't there at that time, but Wayne Hodges, our executive director, spent 40 years at Georgia Tech and has extremely strong relationships with EDA, and he works very closely, has worked over the years very closely with the Atlanta office, and so there are strong ties between the local Atlanta EDA and Georgia Tech. There's constant dialogue and discussion, opportunities to explore ideas and see where we could develop win-win scenarios. So working with government is a new thing for me, non-FDA government. It's really, I've really enjoyed it. There's a great office in Atlanta, and the Department of Commerce has been incredibly helpful through this I6. I was here in October for the I6 conference and had the opportunity to connect with other innovation centers and projects throughout the United States, and they're great about facilitating the dialogue, lessons learned, and things like that.
I don't know if anyone has another question. If that's not the case, I will ask one last question to our guest. And this is about international collaboration. And we talked a little bit about that at the beginning. But if you see it from the perspective of your center, what type of opportunities do you see for other countries in terms of collaborating with them, not only in direct connection with the industry or collaboration in a project, but in terms of the know-how and the experience that you have developed at the center? What type of collaboration you think would be feasible with
I mean,
countries?
I think if there are if there are groups in other countries that are interested, where there's a strong presence of engineering schools and medical schools, and there's a desire to establish a center like GCMI's, I mean, I think it's as simple as coming to Atlanta, spending some time with us, setting up tours at Georgia Tech and, perhaps Emory and the animal facility there, and then just talk. We're constantly learning lessons. Every week there's a new project, there's a new lesson. We're a startup. And, we're happy to share and start a dialogue.
Thank you, Tiffany, and I would ask for a round of applause, and thank you again for
you.
sharing your...
Thank you.
Of the Total Economic Engagement Program. And the main objective of this program is to build an open and transparent business environment. She has worked closely together with the private sector, public-private partnerships, and some programs to facilitate sustainable economic development. Ms. Costa has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in international commerce and policy from the George Mason University in Virginia. And she had previous experience also at the Department of Commerce and the Center for International Private Enterprise in large-scale trade development programs. So we would like to thank Ms. Costa for joining us today, and for the Department of Commerce also our recognition for their support with all these experiences and the work in RIAC, as well as the U.S. mission to the OAS. So Ms. Costa, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Organization of American States. They do a tremendous amount of job working with Latin American companies to make sure that their products, their services, their politics are known around the world. And their staff is just absolutely delightful to work for. And those of you that are part of the OAS, you should know that this staff here in Washington is really, really, really excellent in terms of getting for you what you need. And so thank you for having me here today. I also want to say that the last presentation that you heard was a wonderful segue into what we're trying to do in APEC. And APEC stands for Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It is a trade forum of 21 countries, and you must touch the Pacific Ocean. That is kind of the the way they organized it. And we started some years ago a project to develop APEC principles for voluntary codes of business ethics in 3 sectors: medical devices, biopharmaceuticals, and construction. And we did that because the work was supposed to focus on SMEs, small, medium enterprises, in sectors where they were the major stakeholders. And why APEC focused on business ethics? Does this move? First of all, I can't really see it, but I'll come over here and yell maybe.
You need to take the microphone if possible.
Great, we're in business. Unethical behavior hurts economies. It creates a negative impact on inflation, decreased GDP, currency depreciation, reduced foreign investment, and it undermines health systems and fosters inferior infrastructure. It also hurts individual businesses. It increases the cost of doing business by almost 25%. It lowers sales growth and productivity. It lowers your ability to enter new markets. It constricts access to your capital. Why? Because banks want to make loans to companies that are going to stay in business because they want their money back. Over the long term, it undermines a company's financial growth. So we started off, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Here are some key examples, and quite ironically, at an APEC ministerial with all the trade ministers there, the government of Mexico stood up and said, we would like to provide some supporting analytical rigor to this discussion. So they presented these key examples, and what it says is as countries with higher perceived corruption tend to have lower real per capita GDP. And the World Bank has already estimated that nearly $1 trillion a year is paid in bribes, and that is equal to 3% of world gross domestic product. So, yeah, it's quite a bit. So in terms of BEEPS, which is, they did actually a survey of companies, and they asked, what is the impact to you on corruption? And as you can see down here on the bottom bar, it says that the small, medium enterprises are far more impacted and consider corruption to be a major obstacle to them actually exporting abroad. And one of the reasons is that, you know, they need every cent they have to increase their production capability, to hire staff, to do staff training, to do market research, there are costs associated with securing the SME finance that they need. They cannot spend 25% of their operating capital on paying bribes every time they go somewhere. So the idea here was to harmonize codes of ethics in these 3 major industry sectors so that no matter where an SME found business, he or she or they would know that they were not going to be asked for money. So here's Transparency International's World Perception of Corruption Index. And I generally start out by saying, which I was remiss in doing, the United States is not, and I repeat, not pointing fingers at anybody. We have our own bunch of rotten apples. And so this is a public-private partnership that we do on a collective action basis because we believe that corruption is a collective problem that requires a collective solution. And we monitor our own companies very aggressively to make sure that they behave around the world. And I am in no way saying we are perfect, because we're not. The Business Ethics Initiative, the objective was the adoption, implementation, and ongoing education of high standard principles for ethical business practices, unanimously endorsed by APEC ministers, both foreign and trade, and our leaders, our president and prime ministers. It took an SME focus because they serve as the engine of growth in every single economy, and as long as they are able to operate and innovate in ethical business environments, they do extremely well. APEC principles in sectors with high concentrations of SMEs was our goal: medical devices, biopharmaceuticals, and the construction and engineering sector. And so the benefit to the member economies, it provides a platform for effective industry self-regulation. It supports government endorsement and anti-corruption efforts. It benefits business by providing companies with clarity and harmonization in rules and practices. It allows companies to compete across the region at a reduced cost. It facilitates innovation in key economic sectors. And most importantly, it benefits consumers and patients because ethical collaborations ensure that the decisions that are made on healthcare are in the best interest of our patient consumers, and that the collaboration promotes advances in innovation and access to products. And it also you want to make sure that you have durable infrastructure, not bridges, dams, and apartment buildings that collapse because somebody cut corners. We went, and with Malaysia as our co-host, all 21 countries came together, and we created the Kuala Lumpur Principles for the medical device sector. Then we did the construction and engineering sector with a partner in Vietnam. They were our co-host. All 21 APEC economies participated in that process. We also did it in biopharmaceuticals with Mexico, and the Mexico City principles were the outcome. And just so you know how this works, we have all 21 countries come in. We start out in the morning where they have discussions in groups, and they talk about what needs to go in a set of principles that's appropriate for their countries and is appropriate for their region of the world. We have a rapporteur who gets up at the end of the morning, and we have co-chairs up in front, and they have an agreed text that they have up there, and they start adding those things onto a good foundation text. And then in the afternoon, the public and the private come back together, only they're sitting country by country by country. So each government can sit next to its private sector, its private sector's companies, and they actually start at the bottom of the text, and they go all the way through the text, adding what they think is appropriate, adding what they need, and no one leaves the room until all 21 countries agree on the text. And from there, once they all agree, we take it to our ministers. The ministers bless it, and in the case of these, it went up to the presidents and prime ministers. And in Honolulu in 2011, both foreign and trade ministers under Secretary Clinton and Ambassador Kirk, and then under President Obama, they all endorsed all of the 3 sets of principles. That's what the 30 months has looked like on this. That's why I look tired and old. We have a monitoring program as well. We have a public-private monitoring team. We do quarterly surveys in these sectors. We work with the industry associations. The mentors, who are the mentors, you may ask? Johnson & Johnson, Abbott, Medtronic, Fluor Corporation, Bechtel, the largest company in the world and one of the largest in terms of construction. And why, you say? Because for 25 years they have had ethics compliance programs in place. They have a senior vice president for ethics, global ethics compliance, who does global training for their companies. They're seasoned, they're experienced, they know how to train and help people from diverse cultures and countries, and they're really, really excellent in terms of providing support. We also have Canada's RX&D with us. We have Australia's CEO of their medical device company. We have big associations, we have small companies, we've got academics involved, we've got pretty much the whole spectrum to make sure everybody's voice is heard. This summer in Kuala Lumpur, as a result of this process we're doing, we're having a 1-week ethics compliance train the trainer program so we can geometrically expand the number of ethics compliance trainers in the 21 APAC economies. And what we are doing is bringing them into a training center that's been provided by the Malaysia Anti-Corruption Commission. They have an academy, which is beautiful. In for a week, we have high-level training, we have medium-level training in terms of getting them prepared to go out and train, and then we have 3 days straight where they're going to be in their own sectors with sector-specific training. And what they're going to do then is they're going to go out and they're going to train ethics compliance in their own countries. We follow up then with sort of a big jamboree, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And then we follow up a week later with a healthcare stakeholder awareness in Indonesia, because it is Indonesia's APEC host year. And in that one, we will be assembling all of the other stakeholders for the healthcare sector who need to support ethics compliance. Physicians associations, anti-corruption commissions, regulatory agencies that deal with ethical issues, the whole spectrum, because it's not enough for the private sector to develop codes of ethics. They can't do it alone. They need governments and regulatory bodies to make sure that ethics is enforced in their own home economies. So where does that leave? Why am I here for Latin America? Well, there's a whole vision that has been actually launched. As you know, there is the America's Competitiveness Forum, which is organized and has been so successful under OAS for several years now. And we looked for an opportunity, where do governments and private sector come together? And that happens, like in APAC, in ACF. So last October in Cali, we launched the same work stream, and we started with an educational workshop on the margins of the ACF in Cali, Colombia, beginning with the medical device sector. And further from that, AVIMED, our U.S. large association for medical device companies, has partnered with ALDAMED, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Peru, Mexico's twice, I guess, Peru and Venezuela, and there has been a proposal, a multi-year proposal submitted to Siemens under the Integrity Fund. We are trying to get, and it's a very strong proposal, the money to bring all 34 Latin American countries together to do the very same process through the ACF. So that the companies down in Latin America will have the same advantage when they trade interregionally and also harmonize with Asia, so that if they get an opportunity to ship their products to the Asia-Pacific region, they know no one's going to ask them for money. Why do I have a picture of Peru up here? I have a picture of Peru because in the APEC work, the first country to go over the finish line, which means their associations finished their national industry codes in biopharmaceuticals and medical devices, and are in alignment with the KL principles and the Mexico City principles, was Peru. And so their Prime Minister of Peru used those 3 sectors for a very large national anti-corruption initiative, which blossomed way beyond the 3 sectors, and it turned into a 10,000-man march, which they had in Lima last December. And I will be very honest with you, Chile has finished the process, Mexico has finished the process, and Peru has finished the process. And the Asians are kind of shaking their heads going, all the Latins beat us. And I said, yeah, you're right. They're all finished. Those are the 3 Latins that are part of APEC. And they have offered to be very supportive and be host countries during the process that we envision through Latin America. And we're really hoping everybody just embraces this work and gets involved in it. Who's doing this using the same APEC model? India drafted a code for the construction and engineering sector using the same model, and they were successful. This fall they're holding their ethics compliance training for that sector. Burma, Cambodia, and Laos from ASEAN are joining the APEC work. Mongolia just called us last week and said, can we have a workshop for construction and engineering? And Africa is going to launch on the margins of the Goa Forum in July. I don't know why I'm really up here other than the person that's going to lead this just flew back from Costa Rica last night. And I do global, but she does Latin America specifically. And she speaks fluent Spanish, so I want you to all to meet your contact, which is Leanne Clark. I'm going to hand her the microphone so you can meet her and you can talk in Spanish.
Thanks, Lynn. Hi, I'm Leanne Clark.
We have 4 chairs, so feel free to join us, Leanne.
I just got back from Costa Rica, where I was attending a meeting called the Broader Pacific Dialogue, talking with the U.S.'s trade partners in Latin America about our policies and engagement with the Asia region. And this is a perfect example of how the U.S. has worked with some of our Latin American trade partners through APEC, and how we want to bring this through all of the Americas, through the Americas Competitiveness Forum. And we are still, for full disclosure, we are still seeking funding. We're awaiting funding through the Simmons Integrity Initiative to fund bringing all 34 countries together to agree to hopefully a similar standard for ethical business. But I will be in touch with you through the ACF and the RIAC, hopefully in the next few months. So thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Lynn, for the presentation. I think when we talk about competitiveness, we always think about a cross-cutting theme that involves not only the areas of innovation that we covered before, but we're talking about institutions, transparency, business environment, you name it. So there are a lot of elements, and I would highlight in both presentations that you talk about public-private partnerships and the importance of having engaged leadership and performance by both governments and the private sector. So I have a couple of questions about the initiative, and I would ask anyone who has a question to please get closer to the microphone if you want to ask something. And while that happens, or we get someone online to send us a question or a comment, I wanted to ask about the process and what type of leadership from the private sector is necessary to achieve such an outcome. When you have a voluntary code that it's a set of standards that are going to be followed, but what type of leadership and representation do you require in terms of having a positive outcome where you feel that the private sector is participating and engaged with the governments?
On the medical device sector, our leadership was Chris White at Avamed. He is their executive vice president for ethics compliance, works very closely with the European community, is very active in making sure that there is ethics compliance for his industry members. We partner intentionally with strong leadership and strong organizations that actually have a strong code of ethics themselves and are championing global ethics compliance. We also work with, in the case of Malaysia, their anti-corruption commission and their deputy commissioner, and actually their commissioner and their deputy commissioner, and we work with their SME Corp as well. And those are who we partner with in terms of leadership. In Mexico, we worked with their trade minister. And this was under President Calderon, who at the APEC meetings actually stood up and was one of the supporters of the work. We make sure that what we do is translated to leaders because, like I said, there's two sides of corruption. There's the supply side, that is the private sector, you know, providing money to get something, and the something may be, we don't really need to have our pharmaceuticals or our medical device products go through this clinical trial. Can we just give you some money to make sure we move quickly to the market? Well, you know what happens when you do that? Patients die. They can die because it didn't get the scientific rigor it needed to have. And so the other side of it is the demand side. That is when you have government workers who are in a position to make decisions, and they say, well, make this worth my while. What is this worth to you? Because I'm the one that makes the decision on who's going to get this big hospital national system contract. And it's very, very difficult for a mid-level employee in the government to stop that from happening in their agency. They need their job just like you need your job, just like I need their job. And they can't turn around to somebody that's higher than them and say, you need to stop these practices. What this provided in APEC is for 21 countries to come together collectively and say, this is something we need to do. It's a collective problem that needs a collective action, and it brings private sector, government leaders together, trade ministers, foreign ministers, and actually prime ministers and presidents, to bring this issue to the forefront and make sure we get support from governments as well as the private sector. And it provides a nice, comfortable cover for those of us that work on this to work on it together.
Excellent, thank you. And the other question I have is the issue of corruption and the issue of transparency are important not only for competitiveness, but here we're at the OAS, where there are other areas of the organization that deal with this issue. There are even inter-American instruments dealing with this situation. We know that in order to advance competitiveness, we need to address this issue both from the public and the private sector. And when you develop these codes of ethics, how the cross-fertilization process occurs between sectors? What are the lessons learned from these sectors and your experience in APEC that we can think would be helpful in advancing a similar process where there's interest in some countries or some sectors in the region?
The model, first of all, will work in any sector you like. There are generally, let's take, the differences I can tell you between the three finished sets of principles is that the medical device principles set is about 12 pages long. They're very basic, fundamental. They deal with the various issues. They deal with what's appropriate in clinical trials, what's appropriate in research, what's appropriate for patient, physician interactions with hospitals, those types of things. The medical devices, or the biopharmaceuticals, is about 14 pages. It was quite textual. And that discussion was quite interesting in the room because little did I know even research grants can be corrupted. And certainly clinical trials again, and there are different issues, similar stakeholders, but different issues in biopharmaceuticals. In the medical device sector, they decided that they wanted to have national industries develop full codes within their industries, but they had to include all the KL principles. The biopharmaceutical said, we have 14 pages here of textual codes. We don't need any more than that. What we need is strategies and advocacy plans to help these countries work with their national associations. Some countries had already national ethics codes in place, others did not. Some needed to just better align them. Some started, like Vietnam, from scratch. And so, but they didn't have what we call a crosswalk from the principles to text. And the construction industry was really very different because the stakeholders are very different. You have subcontractors and you have suppliers, but most importantly, the vast majority are thousands and thousands of small companies. And in Malaysia, Indonesia, where you have an archipelago and you have, you know, geographically places that are kind of spread apart, they do have local associations, and they are members of those associations. But they perhaps only build 2 or 3 homes a week, but that doesn't mean that they're not interested in ethics compliance. They are. It's important to them as well. So the recommendation from the economies and the small companies that were in the room when these construction engineering principles were drafted is that they said, these are very high level. This is what every small company certainly could easily and on a, you know, and very affordably implement into their own companies. We don't want or need more than this. And we said, super. You don't need more text. You don't need more bells and whistles. They're very, very high level as well. And so we were very pleased, and each sector is unique. We did not approach this like one, you know, there's a one-size-fit-all plan and set of principles. In Asia, having a reference to appropriate environmental and appropriate labor standards, they added those as well, as was added in India. But that doesn't mean that that's what's, you know, I'm not saying it isn't, but that might not be what it is and would end up in text for Latin America. You may see you have different needs, you have different problems. And when we had this Mexico City for biopharmaceuticals, people told me when we started down this path, nobody's going to talk about corruption. Nobody wants to talk about corruption. I'm telling you, when you shut the doors and you tell people, we have this phrase in the United States, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And so whatever is said in here stays in this room. They don't talk about people. They don't talk about government workers. They don't talk about specifics like that. But they talk about their problems in a way that I was shocked. I learned so much from the 21 APEC economies on the multitude of ways that you can beat a system. I was thunderstruck. And they wanted to make sure that all of those gaps that allowed loopholes for corruption were closed. And they worked very, very hard on it. They worked on it collectively. They debated things. It was through deliberation and discussion, and when it was all said and done, they really do start at the top of the text and they go all the way through the bottom. If one person says, I'm still not happy with that, they go back, they address it, and when everybody can sign off, they say, is there anybody in the room that has an objection to this text? And everybody says, no, we like it. Done. That's the way you'll get 21 countries on board.
Because you take into account the international dimension, the voluntary standards, and the capacity of having the private sector and the governments together at the table. So I think we are almost out of time, but I would like to thank you, Lynn, for coming today, for sharing the project, and for opening the opportunity to pursue similar efforts in the region with the sectors and countries that are interested in that. Leanne, thank you for bringing together the experiences of the United States together with the U.S. mission. And Tiffany, thank you for sharing the experience in Atlanta and the Medical Center for Innovation.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I would like to remind all of you that this was recorded, and it's going to be presented in a few days at riacreport.org. Today's dialogues, previous dialogues, on months to come. I would also like to remind all that the America's Competitiveness Forum will take place on October 2nd to 4th in Panama City. So you are all welcome. And if further information about these dialogues and the other dialogues, more than 50 experiences that we have in the on the signals of the competitiveness in the Americas are available at reactreport.org. Thank you.